Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Ken.
And I'm Bethany.
And we're just a couple of kooky, crazy kids in love that love reacting to some Pokemon.
Yes, we do.
So we're checking out every Gen 9 Pokemon Explained, or every Gen 9 from when this came out, which was, I guess, was 5 months ago, by Loxin and Noggin. And if you want all our Pokemon reactions, check out the description of this video for a playlist. And if you want early ad-free access to Pokemon, then go ahead and check out Patreon. Links in the description of the video. We're a month ahead over there. And you can get early access here on YouTube by hitting the join button. Yeah. That's everything I got for you right now. Ready to do this?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm going to explain the design, lore, and origins, of every Gen 9 Pokemon introduced in Scarlet and Violet and its DLC, because that's what we do on this channel, and in significantly more detail in the other videos. Seriously, it took us an hour to fully explain just the starters, and the video about the Toedscruel and Tentacruel lines, that's 30 minutes. So to prevent this video from being longer than the games themselves, we're gonna summarize, of course, so forgive me for glancing over some extremely fine and niche details. But I'll still give you some, because those are my favorite parts. And first, there's some big overall context you need to know because it alone helps explain so much, and I don't want to repeat it every millisecond. So, Scarlet and Violet take place in the Paldea region, which is based on the real-world Iberian Peninsula, the most southwestern part of Europe. Today, it's the countries of Spain and Portugal, and arguably Andorra. But like, are you even a country? Why do you even exist? Oh, right. So, of course, most of these new Pokemon will reflect those two
secret ingredients
countries, as well as the countries they were most historically involved with.
Well, it's got like a
mostly those immediately
Puppy
around
with a candle
and the Americas. Let's go mostly in Pokedex order, but skip around a bit when it helps, and so we start with the starters. Sprigatito is just a little grass kitty with some fur tufts resembling the fleur-de-lis, an originally French royal symbol that was adopted by many Spanish nobles too as they intermarried, and at one point even shared the same royal family. It evolves into Florigato, a Puss in Boots figure, tabard, boots, and all, fitting as the fairy tale character is Spanish, only here it uses a yo-yo flower bud instead of a rapier, and it plays on many Spanish stereotypes, who themselves often wear masks, which flows really well into its evolution, Meowscarada. Now a magician and a jester. Arguably, the most important Spanish king in history was King
All great
Philip
names,
II,
Meowscarada.
and he loved his jesters so much that he commissioned several royal portraits of them. And circling back to Sprigatito, the reason the iconic jester hat looks the way that it does is because it is a mockery of the royal symbol, the fleur-de-lis. And it's also worth bringing up Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, considered the first modern magician. He was a Frenchman who studied in Orleans, and funnily enough, the place in the United States that uses the most fleur-de-lis is
Houdini?
New Orleans, Louisiana.
Like where he gets his name from, like where he got his stage name?
Famous Mardi Gras celebration, which heavily features jesters in its iconography. And this whole entire chunk of America was originally colonized by the Spanish before the French got it. Before the Americans got it. So it all comes together. Fuecoco is a spicy pepper-shaped crocodile who's hungry all the time. Notably, peppers are native to the Americas, mainly central, and it wasn't until the Spanish colonized the area that they started popping up in European and Asian cuisine. Fuecoco then gets a sombrero made out of a fiery bird's nest upon evolving into Crocolore, who is now rather tired and really wants to take a siesta after eating so much, making its hunched-over position resembling these famous Mexican statues all the better. Mexico, of course, being a major Spanish colony, which is also home to another world-famous celebration, the Day of the Dead, which we see so many references to in Skeledirge, its final form. From its skeletal white face and flames resembling the Aztec marigolds traditionally displayed around the iconic sugar skulls during the celebration, its bright colors and new ghost typing could pull from the Alebrije, Mexican spirit animals who help lost souls and are
so part of the game that you can wash each Pokemon? Yes, give them back.
I guess so.
By singing dirges,
Pokemon Spa Day.
Typically to funeral music, but it also has a love of opera singing, which started when it was a crocodile who vaguely resembles a mariachi singer. And this connection is likely due to crocodiles being the most vocal reptiles, and their bellows mechanically function the same way opera singers use vibrato. There are also, surprisingly, a lot of ghost crocodile cryptids in Spain.
Ooh, it's a great picture.
To go over here, but the big one is the Kuka, or Coco, or Kaku. these kinds of letters. It evolved into a different sort of cryptid throughout Central and South America. And particularly in Brazil, it was a crocodile woman who, upon death,
That's
becomes
freaky.
a fiery ghost bird. Oh, wow. And there are also a few American gods who are crocodiles and alligators with an association with fire and guiding souls, and even a Portuguese tale of a roasted rooster rising from the dead, which became an icon of the country. This line of Pokemon is seriously one of the deepest Pokemon. Like, its ghost typing could even relate to the Phantom of the Opera, and then you get Fuecoco, it has the Phantom's mask. And I barely even talked about the Fireball bird, but we gotta move on. Quaxley is a little boy duckling in his little sailor
Awesome
outfit.
hair.
A pompadour duck, to be specific,
Yeah.
with blue-footed booby feet. Being a sailor is perfect because Portugal invented a lot of things when it came to seafaring technology, including some of the first boats capable of transatlantic trade, and we all know how that went. It evolves into Quaxwell, who now studies the Italian art of ballet and is very serious about it. To be more specific,
Yes, he looks very serious.
that its feet resemble water shoes and it has a swimming top and a water cap, it's studying water ballet, also known as synchronized swimming, like how ducklings follow their mama in sync. Upon evolving again, it becomes what is easily the most Brazilian Pokemon in existence. Brazil, of course, being a major Portuguese colony. It now pulls in the much more active samba dance style, which originated in Brazil, and also has elements of various Amazonian birds of paradise whose extravagant feathers are on full display. In fact, dressing this way is pretty iconic of the dancers in the world-famous Rio Carnival, and Quaquaval's cry actually fits perfectly into any traditional carnival samba music. Listen. While less of a duck now, it does pull in elements from coots and sea eagles to finish off its flair. And now all three of the starters then reference
probably had to, like,
world-famous
heavily
celebrations of the Americas, but specifically those created
mod
due to
that
the influence
song
of
in order
Spain
to, like,
and
get it from
Portugal
copyright.
colonizing the area. Neat. Lechonk and Oinkalone are black Iberian pigs, thought to be a cross between domestic pigs
Lechonk.
and the black Iberian boar. Lechonk has a supreme sniffer, which it uses to find food,
does.
and so
That is
is likely
big
a reference
sniffer.
to truffle-sniffing pigs. The European
looks like a
side of
piggy
the
bank.
Mediterranean Sea is prime truffle foraging territory, after all, and historically, trained pigs were the best at finding
Careful,
them.
don't get suds in
Oinkalone
his
then
nose.
has perfume spritzers on the end of its tail. Notably, the inventor of modern perfume and the perfume capital of the world, France, is right next to Iberia, and Portuguese traders bought this perfume in mass quantities and sold it around the world, most notably introducing it to Japan, where it became a phenomenon. You'll find that quite a few Pokemon this gen relate back to Japan, which makes sense. Pokemon is a Japanese franchise after all, but also, for several centuries, Portugal was the only country from Europe that Japan did any sort of trade with. So
We
a
saw that
lot
in
of
the
goods and
Shogun
cultural
show.
exchanges were happening between them. Let's skip ahead in the Pokedex quite a bit to show what I mean. Tatsugiri is a little sushi nigiri dragon resembling tamago,
Aw.
shrimp, and tuna nigiri. But what is a sushi dragon doing here? Well, while it itself might not be tempura, consider tempura an iconic part of sushi.
he's so
I mean,
cute.
you can't
Look
have
at
a
him.
sushi restaurant and not have tempura ingredients in or beside the sushi. That's just wrong. Tempura is just as Japanese as sushi, right? Well, actually, no, it's a Portuguese invention. But while in Japan, the Portuguese taught the Japanese how to make it using their local ingredients.
Really?
And they loved it, and did it so much that we now associate it mostly with Japanese cuisine.
That's
As
cool.
For the dragony parts of Tatsugiri,
Another fun fact.
that could pull from Shashihoko, Japanese sea monsters that are a cross between a carp and a tiger, though they are sometimes said to resemble dragons too. But then
wow.
again, there is also a
Carp
whole
and a
association
tiger?
with carps and dragons in East Asia already, so
Shenron!
it's no surprise that they often find themselves as decor atop the roofs of shrines and castles, making the exact same sort of poses. Now, Tatsugiri has a symbiotic relationship with Dondozo. They live in its mouth, which is a reference to mouth brooding, a practice some fish use to protect their young in their mouth. Whatever you do, don't swallow! But it works doubly well here. Dondozo's mouth looks like a rice bowl, or a
Bless
don, so more Japanese
Thank you.
cuisine. It even has scales resembling a traditional sushi chef headband, but as a fish, it is a European Welsh catfish. And have you
That's a
seen
big
Dondozo's
fish.
tongue? Actually, it's a stinking sushi platter. And Veluza is also some sushi. I mean, it uses its psychic powers to
It's robotic.
self-sashimi itself.
Metallic.
What the heck? As for what fish it is, it's a merluza, which is the Spanish name for the hake, a cod relative primitive that lives all around the Iberian Oceans to the point where Spain alone consumes more than half of all of the hake eaten in Europe. It's very popular there, and the reason Veluza's body is both so metallic and sharp-looking is likely to refer to how sharp knives need to be to get those perfectly thin slices of sashimi. So as weird as these fish seem, their origins are easy. Tarantula is simple. It's a round tarantula yarn ball with the face of an old man. You see, it's because knitting is often associated with the elderly.
Okay.
The connection between spider webs and yarn is an easy one.
That's actually
But
a
it's
pretty
not
cute
much of a
spider.
tarantula.
Yeah.
I'm
Tarantula.
pretty positive that that's just there because round and it fits. You know, it works in the name, easy name. It mostly resembles various orb weavers, which works well because
spider's not so great.
Orb.
No.
They round. They make circular round webs, like a ball of yarn. Spidops then has a spool of thread for a butt, and is an ogre-faced spider, or a Dinops, which famously and stealthily build traps and cast web nets to catch their prey, which can play into the special ops forces. Its head vaguely resembles some fancy spec ops night vision goggles, and it has what looks like a bulletproof vest, and it even does that secret agent special op thing, like slide down a grappling hook wire like a web, and then take down its foes with a garrote, those special ops wires for choking people, which turns out was also a Spanish invention too, go figure. Nimble is a nimble grasshopper nymph, specifically the Tridactylae or pygmy mole cricket, given its colors and shape. Nimble has a third pair of extra powerful legs folded up in a way that resembles a foldable pocket knife. And what the heck, the earliest pocket knives are from Austria and Iberia. They kind of have a contest going over who's earlier, but later pocket knives would be spring-loaded, making them work similarly to grasshopper and cricket legs, held under tension and then rapidly released. The Spanish navaja is worth bringing up here. It's the oldest folding knife pattern still in use to this day, and for a time was very popular both as a utility
Got
knife
carvings on it, that's
and
cool.
as a fighting knife, but particularly the dark alleyway gangs getting together for illegal street fights kind of way, bringing out a knife. Ooh, now I'm tough.
No,
it makes
West Side
its
Story.
evolution archetyping makes sense. That evolution being low key or low kicks, I still don't know. It's a locust.
It's like low
that
kicks.
resembles the many superheroes and villains of the genre-setting Kamen Rider franchise. This particular generation of Pokemon has a lot of references to Japanese media, but the main Kamen Rider characters always have these insect designs and are mostly grasshoppers at that. They usually have a techno-magical belt that lets them become their superhero forms for a limited amount of time, and they all have a Rider Kick finishing move, which all works out perfectly because that's also literally what this Pokemon does. It enters showdown mode and can't stay that way for long. Notably, it is also significantly bigger than Nimble, so it for sure pulls from the larger locusts, but in not having wings, instead focusing on much more powerful
Is that a
legs,
real bug?
it makes it out to be a sort of
Look like
meadow
it.
grasshopper.
I was
who
freaking
do the
huge.
same. Palmy is the Pikachu clone of the generation. About time we got one that evolves again, but did it need to evolve twice? Palmo is like the most needless Pokemon to date, egad. And then it's Palmot, which gives us the biggest clue as to what it is. It's like a cross between the South American Vizcacha and the Alpine Marmot, which lives in northern Spain.
looks so sleepy, he looks
Marmots
stoned.
are especially
Yeah.
wide and fluffy and are known to
that's
stand
funny.
upright and do palm smacks when fighting over territory
Yes!
for a mate. Hence this line's palm smacking and fighting
Rumble.
type. They can also rub their little paws together and discharge electricity into fainted Pokemon like a defibrillator, hence it knowing the revival blessing.
Come on, you can do it, little guy.
Mouse and Mouseholder fun, the spelling of their names insinuates German origins, which works out well both because of the Pied Piper magically leading rats in tandem with one another, or like Rat Kings, which unfortunately isn't the king of rats so much as it is when a bunch of rats get stuck together and spend their lives tied together by the tails.
What?
Kind of like these mice, only holding hands, so it's
That's
more
a thing?
innocent. Them resembling a little traditional human family, and clothes even, and having beady eyes, and stitching even. It all could mean they are inspired by a very popular and iconic line of classic Japanese dollhouses and dolls, the Sylvanian family, also known as calico critters in the West. I mean, look at this. It's like one-to-one inspiration there. And their Pokedex even mentions that they have dedicated rooms in their nests, just like a dollhouse. And like how dolls are stand-ins for real humans, the traditionally all-white laboratory mice and rats are stand-ins for real humans in scientific study. And do you know how laboratory rats came to be? Well, they were originally the Japanese hooded rat, which then stowed away on a Portuguese trading ship in the early 1700s and made its way back to Europe, where they were were eventually bred into the first lab rats. Bam! Aldea. Fido and Dashbun are really fun. First of all, it's a play on dogs being purebred, but they are literally purebred. Fido is uncooked dough in the shape of some various Spanish pastries, most notably the ensaimada. I mean, just look at those ears, which also resemble the big fluffy ears of
Dashbun has a Princess Leia going.
which of course is a Spanish breed of dog. They've got the iconic wavy fur, which can also explain the wavy folded dough design in the back of this mon. And the Dashbun gets baked, and is very clearly a long-haired dachshund. It's a German, just like pretzels, which share the glossy brown color. But this dog is like a conglomeration of bread, though. It's got like
I like Fido better.
brioche, bun, roll shapes all over it. My favorite detail, though, is that it doesn't have any actual toes. Rather, these lines are like the slits that you add to bread so the air inside can escape while baking. But let's talk about the other dogs now. I mean, they added 6 of them in this game. But Spain have the highest dog-to-person ratio in Europe, and that's just the registered ones. So this makes
I didn't know that.
Griever is a
Guess we're moving to Spain.
dog with a candle on top of its head. In the Middle Ages, candles made of wax were reserved for the nobles and the richer churches. Everyone else had to make candles out of greaves, which is the leftover rendered fat of animals. These days, greaves are mostly used in making dog food, though, which just makes this connection too perfect. As for what breed it is, it's most likely the Breed or Catalan sheepdog.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
This dog, by which I mean the Pokemon, likes to bury itself in the ground, leaving only the candle popping out, like a candle at a gravesite. But then it pops out, like a zombie rising from the dead. Notably, the Portuguese have a bit of folklore about the living dead, the Santa Campagna, which is a grieving procession of the undead, all carrying candles and leaving a scent trail in their wake. They do not wish you any harm, but if you get too close to them, they will drain you of your life energy, which is also literally what Griever does too. As a Houndstone, it is now a skeletal dog with a headstone inside a candle. It may be a play on the phenomenon of extremely loyal dogs, staying with their owners even after their passing. Its arched back is definitely a freshly buried person too, and actually, in Catalan mythology, there are quite a few ghost dogs which do various
And that's how it sounds, but
such as cuddle with you while causing horrible nightmares, or being vampiric and slowly draining you of your lifeblood. But ultimately, dogs are already heavily associated with bones, so bone, dog. Bones are in graves. Grave, dog. Mastiff and Mastiff are mastiffs, like the Pyrenean and Spanish mastiffs, but in this case, they are also a mob boss and a young Yakuza member. Mastiff has so many young Yakuza stereotypes, like the whole head pose thing, and the Italian mafia mob tropes are here as well with Mastiff. He's the leader of the pack, an old Italian godfather type, and notably the Spanish mafia
never go against the family.
The Italian mafia. Spain and Portugal have a lot of connections to South America, where most of the world's illegal drugs are made. So of course the Italian mafia wanted to set up a lot of bases and fronts in Spain and Portugal to make importing all of that easier. And this criminal activity, of course, explains their dark typing. And there's also the whole association with gangs and mob members having big, mean guard dogs like mastiffs. So it's perfect. And those big, mean, razor-sharp cartoon teeth? Yeah, it's gonna tear you to shreds.
Oh, the music changed.
Are all of these dogs like referencing the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker? That 14th century European nursery rhyme? Well, finally back to Pokedex order. We have Smoliv! While olives are more heavily associated with like Greece and Italy, Spain also grows a stinking ton of them. It's like all these countries are Mediterranean or something. Fun fact, humans invented olive oil before we invented writing. Haha, Smoliv is a young green olive, which are quite bitter, like the Dex explains. And then Dolive is much more mature and thus has tasty, fresh-scented oils. And being more feminine humanoid now, it's like a dryad, a planty nature spirit from Greek mythology that most often takes the form of a woman. And this gets even more obvious with Arbala, who does a similar pose to Hamadryads, which are born to a tree. So likewise, this Pokemon is a whole little olive tree now. And the olives are now completely ripe red or Kalamata olives. Ooh, and here's a cool detail. When it attacks, it makes this pose, which is similar to the Bronze Age magical symbol of protection, the Indalo, which originated in Spain and is to this day the official symbol of the Almeria province.
Like they're
now,
runs.
Knacklestack and
Yeah.
Garganackle are
like a
literally
prince.
rock salt crystals embedded in Earth. I mean, NaCl is the chemical formula for sodium chloride, which is what your everyday table salt is. And this links up with Iberia well. The Iberian salt flats are one of the primary reasons Iberia got so wealthy in the early Middle Ages. Salt is rare in Central and Northern Europe, and humans kind of need it to survive. Scandinavia, as just one example, was wholly reliant on importing Iberian salt to feed their growing population in the Middle Ages. So there's some guaranteed big income right there. So yes, salt Pokemon in Paldea. Salt is really important in preserving or curing meat as well, hence this Pokemon's signature move, Salt Cure. Knackley specifically has some Mario 1-Up mushroom vibes. But a mushroom rock is a thing. Knacklestack looks like the stacks of big cube cutouts of stone
my
made
name,
when
say
mining
Knacklestack.
for salt. And Garganackle is a
Oh, Garganackle's
whole
pretty good.
Mesopotamian ziggurat.
Knacklestack,
Perhaps
Garganackle.
there's some tabernacle vibes, or perhaps even some Mesoamerican
Garganackle's a
pyramids.
mouthful.
Depending on time period and mythos, these are all sometimes said to be guarded by living earth golems, just like Garganackle. And of course, when it comes to the American ones, Spain raided them a lot. Heck, the Aztec capital had these, and it was built in the middle of a salt lake. And in modern fantasy, Aztecs, Mayans, Incans, or the fantastical peoples inspired by them are often depicted as being able to control giant living statues or gargantuan colossi, which can vary in size and shape and certainly influence these Pokemon somewhat at least. Ooh, and a minor detail, I like their glowing eyes. It's like a Himalayan salt lamp. Charcadet's line also has glowing eyes, and they are like fiery little knights, burning charcoal. Charcadet, of course, being a cadet, which is an officer in training. It can evolve into Armarouge or Ceruledge, but either way, it's clearly pulling from medieval European knights in a broad, general, heroic sense. But there are some Spanish specifics we can talk about, like the famous Spanish knight El Cid, renowned as one of the greatest knights who ever lived. While he himself was real, a lot of his accomplishments and abilities have become exaggerated thanks to legends and epic poems and such. But supposedly, he fought by dual-wielding large swords, a la Ceruledge, and after he was
Nice.
slain during the siege of Calencia, his dead body was fitted with his armor and put on his horse in order to bolster the morale of his troops from beyond the grave, which
wow.
led to he and his troops to victory, even though he was dead. Kinda like Ceruledge's ghost type then, huh? Then for Armarouge, we could look at Wilfred the Hairy, another
Ooh.
real knight who had a lot
That
of his
is
accomplishments
some
exaggerated.
fluff on
Yeah.
his
Supposedly,
helmet.
he was renowned for
suppose.
wearing huge golden armor and
I'm a
shield
knight.
painted with the blood of the Emperor of the Carolingian Empire, which today is mostly France with a little smattering of northern Spain. But like gold and blood red, yeah. And Wilfred himself, being both of Spanish and Frankish descent, would explain why Armarouge is using the French or Frankish word for red
What's
in
the
its
little guy?
name.
He's so
Then,
cute.
as a duo, they do also give me some Jinn vibes, sort of elemental demons from Islamic mythology, which are often associated with fire and shooting fireballs. And a surprisingly few amount of people know this, but Iberia was once an Islamic state, ruled by Muslims for nearly 800 years. So their Jinn vibes could be very intentional, especially given that Armarouge's arm cannon resembles a jar or pot, and, you know, genie in a bottle and all that. They could really be in any container. Tadbulb and Bellibolt. I mean, it's a tadpole
Bellibolt.
and an Iberian frog, but also it's a tiny light bulb with a little light switch tail, and then it's one of those, like, plasma lamps. And also, these aren't its actual eyes. They're a distraction! These are its real eyes.
Ooh.
And this was likely inspired by the South American Cuyaba
Okay, that was a
dwarf
distraction.
frog, who has
Yeah.
these eye-like bumps on its back to stop predators from sneaking up on it. But its belly and its false eyes could also pull from frogs like the Ranaclomatons, who have these large eye-like tympanic membranes right behind their actual eyes. Also, some people didn't like me bringing this up in the video about him, but I'm gonna say it again. I think Bellibolt is a bit of an avocado because, look at it, it's shaped like a split avocado. Spain also grows more avocados than the rest of Europe combined. Avocados are also the most electrically generative fruit, and avocado skin is very similar looking and similarly textured to frog and toad skin. And also, the more I say it, the more it bugs people, so I'm gonna say it again. Partially inspired by an avocado. Fun fact, Italian physicists studied galvanism and the effects of electricity on muscle tissue primarily by using frog legs. Fun fact 2, Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb, he just improved it, patented patented it and marketed it really well. Shortly after, another Thomas did the same but for Europe. Spanish Tomás Dalmau brought light bulbs to Europe, improved them, built a light bulb factory in Barcelona, and the rest is history.
You said Barcelona the right way.
A little petrel, a seabird which lives basically everywhere. They
That
spend
bird's so
most
cute.
of their lives out at sea, and for a time, sailors thought they brought thunderstorms, or at the very least were an omen of one. Hence the existence and name of storm petrels specifically. Really though, these birds can just feel when a storm is coming, and they seek shelter, which is hard to do in the middle of the ocean. So any boat out at sea, yeah, that's some shelter. We'll hide there. Its eyes kind of make me think of like aviator goggles and hats and stuff. But Kilowattrel then is a frigate bird. What kind of bird is it? It's a frigate bird. Yeah, I know it's a friggin' bird, but what is that?
Ba-dum-bum.
A frigate bird is another seabird, and one that's huge and flies miles across entire oceans on a regular basis.
Wow.
Many frigate birds have these large sacs that they can inflate to
Yeah.
attract a mate, and here, the Pokemon inflates that sac with electricity to store extra power, and to somewhat resemble a pirate's beard. Hence also its seemingly torn wings, lightning rough edges, and angry eyes. You see, another name for the
I don't
frigate
see the
bird
pirate's
is the
beard.
pirate bird, after all, because despite being seabirds, they are not waterproof. A fact reflected in this Pokemon's
Didn't
text
even see
entry
it
too.
popped up
So
again.
frigate birds have to steal
Now that he said that.
100% of their food from other birds who have caught fish. They are pirates. And of course, being ocean crossers makes them perfect for Spain and Portugal. And notably, in the golden age of piracy, many pirates were Spanish and Portuguese.
So this bird is what was missing from Assassin's Black Flag.
Shrew that
Yep.
likes to doodle. Iberia is no
Shrew.
stranger to shrews, and one of
my
their local
God.
ones is the Pyrenean Desman, which really does look the part. And interestingly, certain shrews are some of the few venomous mammals, so Shroodle being poison type works out. In Shroodle's case,
tongue.
it spits poisonous, spray paint-like venom. Its teeth are like a painter's palette knife, and its hair tuft is like a paintbrush. Its face then resembles a gas mask, which many spray painters have to wear. But I think my favorite detail is that the face somewhat resembles the most famous piece of old school graffiti. Kilroy was a meme in World War II and was graffitied by soldiers all over the place. Shroodle then evolves into Graphii, a cross between a ring-tailed lemur and an eye with those gross,
Whoa.
long middle fingers.
Yeah.
Graphii's face also resembles a gas mask, but now it has some punky hair sticking up and fur resembling a hoodie. Some real cool graffiti tagger vibes. Notably, a lot of punky spray painters, when tagging walls, will get a single finger covered in paint too because of how spray paint cans work. And notably, Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, is also considered one of the street art capitals of the world, so that's cool. Plus, many shrews and even eyes tag their territory by slobbering on their hands and rubbing the scented
Crazy
spit
eye looking.
places, just like
Yeah.
these Pokemon. Eyes will also use that long, slobbery finger to reach into little bug holes. Get bugs out of there. Yum. Also, as a missing link between the two, because, like, is shrew to lemur? What? Well, there are tree shrews and also mouse lemurs, so that kind of works. But lemurs and eyes live in Madagascar, so why are these here in Paldea? Well, because it was a Portuguese man who first colonized Madagascar, but it didn't super work out. But at the time, they brought many findings back. The Portuguese royal family fell in love with the lemurs and brought back several for their menageries. Also, the forest that these live in with the paint everywhere, it's based on the Oma forest in northern Spain. Quite the landmark, quite the trail. Some of these trees are painted with stripes, others have eyes, or this. Good old public artists. Now, Bramblin and Bramblegast. Could have been better. They are tumbleweeds, or rather, they are lost souls that got trapped in tumbleweeds.
That
Tumbleweeds
sucks.
are among the most invasive plants ever. Once the plant gets its seeds made, it dries up, detaches from the ground, and lets the wind make it roll, dispersing its seeds all over. They are native to somewhere around northern central Eurasia, but have since spread to everywhere. But you see, a rolling tumbleweed is an icon of ghost towns in old spaghetti western movies. I mean, Bramblin's Cry is even the iconic spaghetti western movie whistle.
Nice.
But that's like super classic Americana. What's what's that got to do with Spain? And also, why is the genre called spaghetti western anyway? Well, it's because the genre actually started in Italy, and they did their filming in the deserts of Spain because the climate there is very similar to the American Southwest. Many old western movie sets are still up in Spain as tourist attractions too. But even without that fact, many of these movies feature conflicts between English and Spanish speakers because, like, that's historically accurate. The Mexican-American War and all the violence around it, and but speaking of Mexico, it's Capsicid and Scovillain, or Scovillian. No, Scovillain. Scovillain?
Capsicid
They are
kind of looks like a
chili
Dennis
plants,
Mess.
habaneros, bell
I can see that.
peppers, and the like, which again are native to Mexico. The calyx of a pepper is this part that on Capsicid resembles a little baby bonnet or even an eggshell, which is why I always thought Capsicid looks kind of like an ugly baby bird. And this part resembles a bib.
See that?
It evolves into Scovillain, and that name helps us out here. First of all, the Scoville scale is how you measure how spicy something is. But also, a villain is not just any old bad guy, but specifically a bad guy in media, in a story, in theater. And that, of course, points us to the comedy and tragedy masks used to symbolize theater plays since ancient Greece, which may also refer back to those spaghetti western movies. I mean, look at Scovillain's pose. In its art, it's like a big britches cowboy barging into a saloon, and in battle, it stands like a cowboy in a duel, getting ready to draw its weapon and fire a spicy bullet seed.
We both grabbed it at the same time. I was like we were about to drink it at the same time. Like, I just can't. That's too.
Spicy food. It's
I,
one of those
like,
things
didn't
that
even
you
clock
either
that,
love
but
or you
yeah,
hate.
no.
Either the pain of the spicy food makes you feel alive, or you might be like my brother who thinks guacamole, or heck, even like, I don't know, tuna salad is too spicy. Now that's a real tragedy. But oh gosh.
Well,
is it
some
also
guacamole
comedy?
can be pretty
Like
spicy.
Klopf, a very silly velvet crab
Yeah,
which
it's
live in
worth,
the
like,
Mediterranean
asking.
Sea.
Yeah, depending on how they make
Or
it.
could even be a Chinese mitten crab, which are invasive to the area, or a horsehair crab, which similarly has fuzzy bits and is orange. Then there's decorator crabs, which are known to decorate their bodies with sea sponges and anemones and stuff for protection, perhaps similar to Klopf with the rocks and the bushes. But basically, it's a crab that's also a cliffside, but it's got a castle wall-shaped mouth and an affinity for ambushing foes after jumping from the cliffside on top of the foes. Could be like a castle's murder holes, where guards would drop large rocks from the floor above onto their enemies. The practice was popular in Spanish castles after all. Relor is a scarab, which live all over, especially around the Mediterranean Sea. But here, it's specifically a dung beetle, except it rolls around mud instead of poo. But I like how the shape on its belly looks like the poop emoji. But its face looks like the disguised emoji, which uses the iconic novelty Groucho Marx glasses. Groucho Marx was a comedic genius back in the day, sort of rolling the dung of society back into their face, as it were. And these glasses have gone on to be used as a trope for a bad, cheap disguise. But why is Relor in a disguise at all? Well, perhaps that has to do with its evolution. Rabska, who is now a jewel scarab beetle with an old Asian wise master face. According to its Dex entry, its true body is the infant inside of the ball, which would make the beetle outside a disguise, would it not? I like how whether you look at Rabska upside down or not, it doesn't matter. It's still got a big mustache with big eyebrows. Also, many species of scarab will lay their eggs inside of piles of collected dung, so this works out well. Now, the Asian influence doesn't stop at its face, though. In a way, you could see this old man scarab as carrying the infant, which is also itself, as it's reincarnating itself. It's like a wise monk or guru who has achieved enlightenment and is reincarnating before our very eyes. Similar ideas were popular with the Egyptians as well, who are heavily associated with scarabs and saw them as symbols of reincarnation. Re is reborn every day, after all, and in the early morning is represented by Khepri, who rolls the sun across the sky. Espathra also has some Egyptian inspiration in there. It's an ostrich with the iconic Egyptian haircut, said to be the style used by the high-fashion Queen Cleopatra. Ostriches also have gigantic eyelashes, so again, very high fashion. And look, the Pokemon even has high heels. How did they do that? though that hair could also be a reference to mantilla, 16th to 19th century women's headwear that was very fashionable in Spain and Latin America. But back to Egypt, they are often
Someone's
said by
headwear.
spiritualists to have started a lot of ancient psychic practices, hence the psychic typing, and that links up well with the goddess Ma'at, the goddess of truth, clairvoyance, and the regulator of the stars. Perhaps why many these days trust in horoscopes, the alignment of stars, to tell the future. And Ma'at's symbol was, of course, an ostrich feather. But speaking of stars, Espathra evolves from Flittle, who is a little baby bird. Maybe it's even egg-shaped.
Tweety
because
bird.
it's like the iconically large ostrich egg. After all,
Like,
in
also,
the
like,
Bronze
kinda
and
like
Iron
Ghost.
Ages, it was common to
Yeah,
decorate
I
ostrich
see that.
egg
He's wearing
shells,
sheets.
both by carving patterns into them and adhering precious metals and fabrics
Little.
to them. Nice, but the way it hovers around with its spinny crown and the way its cry sounds definitely makes it seem like it's an adorable little alien UFO, especially the way they are typically depicted in Japanese media. And that does line up well with the conspiracy theory that the pyramids were built with alien technology from the top down. Bet you didn't know that. But how does this link to Iberia, though? Well, because ancient Egypt was involved in trade throughout the Mediterranean, but it gets more specific than that. Enter the Phoenicians, particularly ancient Carthage. Not only were they the ones primarily decorating the ostrich eggs, but they were also very high fashion by ancient world standards, being the primary makers of dyed fabrics, including the rare and expensive purple ones. And would you look at this map of their territory at their peak? Nice! Tink-a-tink, tink-a-tough, and tink-a-ton. A baby girl who builds a baby rattle, then improves
all
it into
tiny.
a hammer as she gets older, and then into a massive mallet when she's full grown, but she's
Yes.
still really small, because it's the classic little girl with a giant mallet media trope. But what are these in terms of, like, fey creatures? Well, they're duende, or mora, little goblin-y things from Iberian folklore. The males are said to hide away underground, never leaving, and they just work on smithing and crafting fine jewelry and such, while the females
like
are
the tink sounds like what it would
strong
sound
and
like with the
tough
hammer
ones.
going down.
Miners, the construction crew, the guards.
And tough is like,
they are said to have constructed the many
you're so tough when you're a kid.
dolmens and megaliths across
Yeah.
Iberia,
And a ton,
which
just
is why in
how much the hammer
Pangea
weighs.
you find these Pokemon around
I like
the
that.
ancient ruins. Female Mora were also said to have long hair and work as yarn makers in their downtime. Perhaps why Tinka-Tuff and Toad's hair is long and even resembles knitted hats and gloves even. There's way more details
mad
to
dog
this
look.
line, but it's in this video here. Yay. Let's
Bonk.
move on to Bombardier. Oh, no. It's just the classic idea that the stork delivers babies in a cloth. Which originated somewhere around Germany, except this Pokemon carries boulders instead of babies, and it drops them like a bomber plane, which I guess is like this Italian bomber plane, which is nicknamed the Stork, and was first used in the Spanish Civil War. And both white and black storks live in Iberia. The black ones already kind of look like they have an apron, so it works. Finizen is a striped or bottlenose dolphin. Dolphins live pretty much everywhere and are known to play with hoops and rings, be them plastic, bubble, or flaming, hence its little, like, rings on its tail. It evolves into Palafin, who gains a heart. And that's seemingly it, but this is just a secret identity. And like Clark Kent going into a phone booth, or Bruce Wayne returning to the Batcave, this Pokemon returns to its Pokeball and then comes out in its hero form.
Nice.
Its body plan is like your typical exaggerated male superhero with its ginormous chest and big biceps and then tiny little legs. Its heart emblem becomes a whale tail-like design in place of other superhero emblems, particularly Superman's. I mean, this Pokemon even evolves at level 38, referencing the original Superman comic book released in 1938. And it also adds some orca whale elements among its superhero costume, as orcas are actually a kind of dolphin. Its shiny color makes this obvious. Now, what this has to do with Spain is interesting. For a long time in the 20th century, Spain was a fascist dictatorship, which practiced a lot of censorship in their media. The most relevant law, though, was absolutely zero superhero comics anywhere. And this is the time period when these comic books were all the rage elsewhere. So the closest they had were dramatic retellings of pro-Spain historical events, or illegally imported and illegally translated comics, which were actually incredibly
Comic
popular,
contraband.
despite,
Yeah.
or perhaps because of, them being illegal. Spain's dictator eventually died, and Dolphin, however you want to pronounce it, took over.
Said comics for
And one
everyone.
of the first things he did was, hey, fascism is pretty messed up, so how about we try democracy? He was praised as a hero by many. The hero, the Spanish Dolphin.
So what's the
The
catch?
Dolphin saved Spain in unbanned superhero comics. So here's a dolphin superhero Pokemon who's Spanish and a dolphin.
Guess there's no catch.
Yeah. Also in Brazilian mythology,
Did sound
there's
like
the
there was one
Poto,
coming.
Yeah,
an
didn't it?
Amazonian river dolphin that is said to disguise itself as a human and live among them from time to time. That could play a role too. Now, Squawkabilly, a rockabilly monk parakeet who are invasive to Iberia. Yeah, they come in 4 colors, and the rarity of those colors actually lines up with the rarity of real parakeet
With the gray
colors
hair.
too, which, funnily enough, also lines up with the colors of the Brazilian flag, which works well because that flag is really only a small modification of their flag when they were still a Portuguese colony. But these Squawkabilly, sticking to their groups of their own color, is like color-based gangs, as they are like biker gangs, who saw their start in 1950s America. Greasers, going all Elvis style. This style was eventually picked up by the Japanese, who added trench coats and exaggerated pompadours, and honestly, parakeets as pets kind of act like a lot of these Japanese biker gangs. Mischievous, rowdy, they bite and swear and squawk a lot. And we know that Japanese biker gang stuff is playing a role in this game because of the Starmobiles. Like, that's literally a Bosozoku motorcycle, but a car. The Bosozoku being a Japanese biker gang who delve deep into this aesthetic and into being as loud and obnoxious as possible. But that's not all, because there are actually cars and trucks that follow this in similar aesthetics in Japan too, particularly the Decatora. Super flashy and light bedazzled trucks. It's so over the top, just like the Starmobiles really, which themselves are topped with another odd Pokemon, a Revavroom, which evolves from Varoom. Really? 2 car engine Pokemon? One of them is like full on just a car then? I thought the minecart was odd, but this, I guess we've always had weird artificial oddities like this. But according to the Pokedex, it is said that this Pokemon was born when an unknown poison Pokemon entered and inspirited the engine left at a scrap processing factory. The engine it inhabited is a single-cylinder internal combustion engine, the kind often found in small things like lawnmowers or lightweight mopeds. And then Revavroom has multiple cylinders,
Look, he's
like
stretching
more
under the
traditional
blanket.
car and motorcycle engines. The formation of
passed out.
rocks that Revavroom attaches itself to is quite reminiscent of retro
You heard the
sports
gizmo,
cars.
and you knew that was
To
almost his
me,
name.
But it
Yep.
floating around is just so odd. It's like supposed to be a futuristic flying car that still has wheels for some reason and a combustion engine for some reason. I hope that's not where the future's heading. Well, Spain does have quite the lucrative automobile industry. It's the second highest in Europe, only behind Germany. But even then, many German car companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz use Spanish car factories to make some of their cars. Even Ford makes their European vehicles in Spain. Then also consider that the whole concept of Grand Prix racing started right next door in France. Spain definitely has quite the car culture, which certainly leaks over into motorcycle culture. I mean, Barcelona, Spain, has the highest number of motorcycles per capita in Europe, which explains why Cyclazar is here. A motorcycle lizard with a back shaped like a motorcycle seat and a head shaped like a bike racing helmet or a short windshield. And it's even got these orange spots reminiscent of turn signals while also doubling as iguana ears. Notably, there are lizards known as helmeted lizards too, which are found throughout Central America and have a similar head shape. Cyclazar likes to puff out its fan throat and curl its tail like a chameleon and let people ride around on it. And there are quite a few fan-throated lizard species, which use their fans both to attract mates and to signal to foes that they are tough. And when you look up the most bike-friendly cities in Europe, you'll often find Porto, Portugal. And when it comes to mountain biking, which these lizards and their legendary counterparts certainly do, you'll find that the whole Iberian Peninsula is just really good mountain biking territory. Really, the northern side of the Mediterranean region as a whole is considered the best place for it in the world, both because the mountains and trails are great and because the weather is rarely that cold, allowing for year-round mountain biking. In my research, I commonly found Italy as the #1 country for mountain biking in Europe, with Spain commonly following. And then consider the more futuristic-looking superbikes for bike racing. MotoGP is the International Superbike Grand Prix, and it's headquartered in Madrid, Spain. So that certainly explains Cyclazar, as well as some of Corydon and Miraidon, which we'll get to. But notably, Cyclazar is also a perfect in-between of the two, having elements of both and being the green color that it is, right between scarlet and violet on the color spectrum. Earthworm. So first of all, earthworms live basically everywhere there's dirt, but this earthworm is made of steel and resembles a subway train, probably because Madrid, Spain has one of the oldest oldest metros, but not the oldest, which is the London Underground, which, like, we just had Galar, so why not introduce this Pokemon last gen? Well, whatever. This is Earthworm, and unlike Earthworms, it has little arms, or parapodia, which many Earthworm relatives have, like annelids. And perhaps it's even pulling some inspiration from the Mexican mole lizard, or worm lizard, which looks like a fat, long earthworm.
Yeah.
It has 2 feet and 2 eyes, and a more traditional mouth, unlike earthworms, but very like earthworm. And this Pokemon being so big, despite being an earthworm, and even being a Titan boss, may be because of just how common gigantic worm monster is. Yeah. Or it could just relate to the aptly named giant earthworm, which used to live all across Europe, but now just lives in what remains of the Black Forest. Glimmet and Glimora are oddities. Crystal flowers with clear faces in the stamen. I mean, Glimmet looks like a flower's bulb, and then Glimora the flowery end. And given the color, the number of petals and stamens,
Like
and
that.
how weird they look, they could be inspired by the Passiflora, the flower
That's what makes me think of
that
Gamora.
passion fruit grow from.
Yeah.
As a flower, they are somewhat poisonous, and they grow natively in South America, but now several of the species grow in the wild in Spain, after the Spanish brought them back for selling. But that's just how they look. It's not what they are, because they are rock poison type. So, rocks, not plants. So, in short, they are copper sulfate, which comes in the form of blue crystals and is highly toxic, especially when it breaks and spreads tiny particulates in the air, which would explain this Pokemon's signature ability, Toxic Debris. When it gets damaged, parts of it break off and spread particulates into the air. Wow! And plus, Spain is no stranger to this ore with their many copper mines. Flamigo! Oh, it's a flamingo.
Yeah.
And a friend, because amigo
Basically the
is
same
friend
word.
in Spanish. Well, greater flamingos do spend time in many Iberian lagoons, and it being fighting type could be because of the rigorous mating dances flamingos do. They are known to fight for mates as well, but not as often. The way it knots its neck to store its power is definitely interesting. It for sure makes me think of balloon animals. Flamingos are not as iconic a balloon animal as, say, the dog, but they are still among the most popular, especially as hats. But back to its fighting type, I do like the way they did its lip. It's like the big swollen black bruised lip on a boxer. Citwaddle and Cetitan are walking
Citwaddle.
cetaceans or whales. Particularly these 3 Arctic whales, the beluga's color, the narwhal's horns, and the mouth of the bowhead whale, which has the largest mouth to ever even, by the way. Notably, in the Middle Ages, narwhal tusks were very popular with European kings, nobility, and even popes, as they were sold as magical cure-all unicorn horns. They were very expensive, so even rich folk could only get 1 or 2. That said, Spanish King Philip II, there he is again, was obsessed with unicorn horns and had 12 of them. And the Spain connection doesn't end there. Spain and Portugal were early explorers charting the seas and making more accurate maps with spiky whale monster decor, sometimes even with 2 legs, which also brings us to the modern Japanese cryptid, the Ningen, which is
What?
a 2-legged white whale head. Sad fact, after most of the Western world agreed that whaling was bad, Spain was one of the few countries who disagreed and continued sailing all the way to the Arctic Circle just to do it. To these 3 whales specifically. That makes me frown, so let's cheer up with the new regional variants and evolutions. Paldean Tauros with its 3 breeds are now fighting fire, and fighting water type. The fighting is easy and goes along with their black coloration. If any one animal had to be the icon or mascot of the country of Spain, it would be the black Spanish bull, which is the main bull used in bullfighting, another Spanish sport, which of course has its controversial practices, to say the least. Like at first you may think, yeah, it's fire type, because in cartoons these bulls are shown being fiery with rage, and like, yeah, sure, that too, that works. But some Spanish bullfighters, or matadors, would also actually catch the bull's horns on fire, or even use fireworks to make it more intimidating, I guess, but it does also scare and hurt them. And I'm sure that the other controversial practice of having these bulls charge through the streets while everyone runs away and has just a grand old time before the bulls reach the end of the road, where they then purposefully make them fall off of a cliff into the sea, isn't exactly pleasant for the bulls either. But a noteworthy tradition it is, and at least the bulls can swim well. They got some water buffalo in their veins. And I like how the water Tauros' tails spin like a boat propeller. Paldean Wooper, like regular Wooper, is a little axolotl mudskipper guy, but this time it is poison ground type instead of water ground type. And this is reflected by its gills and face being reminiscent of a skull and crossbones.
He looks so happy to be getting
the
back.
iconic toxic deadly warning sign.
I like
And
our
its
dogs.
chest pattern is even like a little rib cage, which relates to an ability it gets when it evolves into Clodsire, who is still a Chinese giant salamander, but now for better attacking, it can poke its ribs out of its back. That's so cool and weird, and completely inspired by the Iberian ribbed newt, which is both brown and actually has this grotesque ability. That's so cool. So Wiglet now, a water diglet in a way. It's a garden eel, which dig deep into the
Looks like a
seafloor and
sock
pop their
puppet.
heads out like this
It
to get
does.
food. Then Wugtrio, given its coloration and clustering,
They look like hot
definitely
dogs.
seems primarily like a group of giant tube worms, which live even deeper underwater. And you almost never see their butts, but their behavior and other abilities relate to some
Never see
other
their
sea
butts.
life. Take their gooey ability. Something
Okay with
touches
that.
them and then they get all sticky and
Okay
slow
that they hide their
down.
butts.
That's how the long and narrow hagfish protects itself. A thick, sticky layer of mucus all around its body sticks to and slows down any that attack it. And they also like to hide under rocks and dig underground in small groups. All this sea life lives all over the seas, though oddly, garden eels are nowhere near Iberia and instead call Indonesia and the Caribbean home. Oh yeah, both places
Who's that
that
chilling in the
Portugal
back?
and Spain colonized greatly. Great. So Toadstool and Toadcruel are mushrooms with toes instead of jellyfish with tentacles, hence the names. They are mainly wood ear mushrooms, but with the guttation of the bleeding
Yep, I would have initially thought they were
tooth
jellyfish.
fungus bullet. And unlike every other mushroom Pokemon, these guys aren't poisonous. In fact, they are considered very tasty, which is how they link to Spain quite
Gross.
well. Iberia has over 1,500 currently identified species of native mushrooms, and mushrooms are very absorbent, meaning they bounce back like a running shoe, hence Toadstool being such an active and fast runner. And they absorb the flavors around them, hence their common use in Spanish cuisine. Spain hosts many international tapas competitions, which is essentially an appetizer contest, and mushrooms are among the most common ingredients in those tapas. Then, Toadstool building societies and their signature ability being what it is, both relate to the mycelial network, or the blanket of fungi that lives just below the surface of dirt everywhere, connecting entire forests together in a sort of tree internet. Learn more about it in our Toadstool video. Annihilate. What a curious
Great
product
name.
evolution. It's ghost type now. It got so angry it died and became a Bossajuan from Basque mythology, which is from northern Spain.
Definitely got a cool upgrade,
Bossajuan are these
Annihilate.
huge, round,
I didn't remember you've
hairy,
made other
ape-like
videos.
Neanderthal
Yeah.
cryptid men known for their overwhelming brute strength and beards that go down to their knees. Then sprinkle in some Japanese inspiration like the Onryo, an iconic vengeful spirit of sorts, which is fitting of Annihilape's dex entries, and the way Onryo are typically depicted with their long tendril-like hair and frayed cloth, which is much like Annihilape's new hairdo. Farigiraffe! The name is still a palindrome upon evolving from Giraffarig, but it's inside out because the tail just sorta inside-outed up the whole neck of the giraffe, which is now much longer and has 4 horns, which is much like the real giant 4-horned giraffe known as the Decanotherium rex, which 9 million years ago lived in what is Iberia today. Hey, Farigiraffe! How's the weather up there? Ha ha! But no, actually, your heads now resemble like an astronaut helmet. And I mean, the first proto-astronaut suit was invented by a Spanish guy. It was made so humans could survive riding in high-altitude weather balloons on the edge of space and document the weather. So I figured you could at the very least use your psychic powers to tell me the forecast. I'm thinking of going to the coast this week. No? Okay. Dun-dun. Sparse. Oh boy. I'll say it
That was
again.
good. Well done.
If they made a Dunsparce evolution cool
Well done,
like a
Axel.
dragon or something, it would completely miss the point of Dunsparce. It's a dud. It's a dunce. It's a Tsuchinoko. That's like the whole point of the yokai. It is a fat, useless snake. And now when Dunsparce evolves, it just gets bigger. It adds a segment or two and grows. I guess you could say it's like another yokai now, the Nozuchi. Another lesser cur. A somewhat looked down upon yokai. But it is bigger and more aggressive than the Tsuchinoko, at least. It is a big, hairy caterpillar that acts like a snake, which also makes you think of those caterpillars that resemble snakes to try and scare predators away. Like, yeah, it's bigger and meaner looking, but it is still just a weak little caterpillar. And yeah, some of these live in Spain. This Spanish one even looks like it has a second head almost.
Yeah.
Gambit has the worst new name of the generation, in my opinion, but it itself is cool. It is a continuation of Poniard and Bisharp, or Bisharp, which pronunciation version do you prefer? They pull their names from chess pieces or shogi pieces originally. You know, pawns, bishops, or soldiers and the general. But now we got the king, the feudal lord, or the shogun. Big, overly exaggerated samurai helmet with mustache and all. One thing I think is weird is that it sits on its hair. Yeah, that's odd. But its black and red coloration lines up with
Looks
the
like it
emperor
floats on its hair, too.
throne.
Yeah, it's
So
like it's a
what's up?
hoverboard.
Yeah.
Again, Portugal was one of 2 countries that Japan allowed trade with in the early days of contact. Hence this and all the other very Japanese things in Paldea. Archaludon, introduced in Blueberry Academy, which is off the coast of Unova, means this
got
Pokemon
Transformer.
could be more linked to that region than to Paldea.
Yeah.
And I can see it.
Eiffel
Rather than
Tower
the tall
for
building
hands.
Duraludon, whose Gigantamax form resembles the famous Shard skyscraper in London, Archaludon resembles a bridge. Unova, being based on New York City, of course has a load of bridges that reference many world-famous bridges in New York City, many of which Archaludon could be referencing, but actually, none of them perfectly. Archaludon's architecture much more closely resembles that of Guadiana International Bridge, which is a famous bridge that connects the countries of Spain and Portugal, like how Paldea combines them into one region. Diplin, because Applin, the Wyrm in an apple, needed another evolution, but this one just stabs a stick in it and dips it in syrup, making it resemble the red candy apples that are commonly found at Japanese summer festivals, which is the setting of the DLC Diplin was introduced in, Kitakami, during its summer festival. Then in the second part of the DLC, back in Blueberry Academy, we get its evolved form, Hydrapple. Now a whole Hydra inside of an apple-shaped ball of syrup. It's especially fitting that this academy is by Unova, as real-world Unova, New York City and a little bit of New Jersey, is where these syrupy candy apples were originally invented before the Japanese loved and adopted them. How cool! Plus, New York City is often referred to by its nickname, the Big Apple, and, going back to the game's roots in Paldea, we can find the Lorinian Hydra from Greek mythology.
Monetized.
One job, to guard the golden apples of the gods, which happen to be located in the Canary Islands, which are southwest of Iberia and owned by Spain. Back in Kitakami, it's Poltergeist and Sinistia. I like how they kind of swapped the names around from its near relative Sinistea and Poltergeist. They are all Tsukomagami, inanimate household objects that gain a spirit in Japanese folklore. The objects? Oh, it's a matcha container and a matcha teacup with matcha whisk, because it's matcha tea now instead of Earl Grey or whatever British tea the OGs were. And I like how at some point they were broken and put back together kintsugi style, the Japanese practice of repairing stoneware with gold, thus making it even prettier and giving it a story. But okay, back on track with the main Pokedex. It's Gimmighoul. Oh, it's like a tiny gray alien stealing human artifacts. Its antennae are like a dowsing rod, only it finds coins instead of water. And as a chest, it is very much just your iconic D&D mimic, a staple in RPGs as a whole, tabletop or videoized. Or maybe it's kind of like a reference to the whole gold slime monster type, the ones that are skittish and run away, but if you manage to beat one before they can escape, they drop a lot of treasure. Actually, in Catalan folklore, there is a tiny dark-skinned sprite named El Negret, which if you manage to catch and touch it with a candle, it will explode into a pile of coins. And
Whoa.
then with its ghoulish gray corpse body and coin association, I immediately think of the ancient tradition of putting 2 gold coins on the eyes of someone before burial, which was to pay Sharon, the ferryman of the dead. How perfectly fitting of its eyes, which are literally like gold coins. But that also makes me think of the many tales of cursed Aztec gold, which were popularized by the Spanish. Heck, that's the entire plot of Pirates of the Caribbean. The pirates and all who took the coins were cursed to be ghoulish because of the cursed treasure of the Spanish conquistador Captain Cortez. It's very similar to how Gimmighouls curse those who touch their coins and is then able to somewhat control
Great
them
name.
by having them gather more coins and bring them back to it. That's like literally Pirates of the Caribbean. And even like Uncharted has cursed Aztec treasure that turns people into ghouls. It's a trope! And then after you do manage to fill up Gimmighoul's treasure trove with 999 coins, it evolves into Goldango, which is like several stacks of gold coins
Goldango.
and the Silver Surfer, but gold, and a string cheese mascot. But it's not like string cheese was invented in Spain or anything. No, it really wasn't. I don't know why you're waiting for a dramatic reveal. Oh, wait! It was invented in one of their colonies, Mexico! Being a surfer seems random at first, but it's actually pretty spot on. So there's the lost city of El Dorado, right? A legendary city that Spanish conquistadors were after because it was said to be a city so full of gold that they wore it and built buildings out of it. But actually, that legend got warped by the Spanish pretty heavily through both mistranslations and word-of-mouth exaggerations. What El Dorado actually was the tradition of the Muisca people. Whenever they crowned a new ruler, the coronation ceremony involved covering the new ruler's body head to toe in gold dust and have them stand on a tiny raft, get pushed out into the middle of a lake almost like a surfer, and then they would jump into the water and wash all of the gold off. So, literally a golden man on a tiny floating board. Now this generation's pseudo-legendary Frigivax, Arctibax, and Baxcalibur. There's definitely some theropod dinosaur in there. Arctibax specifically is very baby Spinosaurus. But the line as a whole pulls from Concavinator, whose fossils were first discovered in Spain. And what makes them unique and very spot on as the inspiration for these Pokemon is their single, small, and rather odd-placed sail plate crest in the middle of their backs, which was used for thermoregulation.
Sludge is he fighting?
Same with these Pokemon, only taken to an icy extreme. But these dinosaurs also have the sharp quills on their forearms, which the Pokemon move to the wrists for easier punching. On top of this, Baxcalibur specifically is the most clear Godzilla reference we've gotten in Pokemon, which already has tons of Godzilla references. I mean, this guy evolves at level 54, a reference to the original Godzilla movie releasing in 1954. And its chest is like the perfect cross between Godzilla's crests and a snowflake, which is then elongated a bit to resemble a huge fantasy magic version of the famous sword in a stone, Excalibur. It's just stuck in this rock-colored dinosaur instead. Now, the Paradox Pokemon are interesting. While they appeared into our world through what we and the AI professor thought was a time machine, we later learn in the game that the time machine doesn't actually do much time travel at all. Rather, it's mainly just reaching into other timelines where the worlds are in very different states. While theoretical, perhaps the future timeline is really just a timeline where human technology advanced much, much more rapidly. But then at some point, the technology got too advanced. Perhaps an evil organization succeeded and the world ended. And only the robotic Pokemon survived since they lack biological needs. Perhaps in the past timeline, humans just never appeared. So the Pokemon never really domesticated, even a bit, and remain more monstrous, like many pre-domesticated animals. So no, the Paradox Pokemon are not ancestors or descendants of the Pokemon in our timeline. They are just Pokemon from a parallel world that progressed very differently from ours over time. Honestly, very smart of Game Freak to do it that way. The implication that in the future of the Pokemon world, all the Pokemon are robots is kind of dark and makes a mess of any future game they make that takes place in the future. But them not actually
Multiverse.
from the future
It's everywhere.
fixes that problem. Same with doing anything involving the past. The Paradox Pokemon are almost like non-canon canon. But that all said, there is still some time travel involved, but it's not quite as distant. And also, it's purposefully very unclear what's really going on. Quote, I am researching methods to catch Pokemon that live in different timelines, so I might transport them to the present day in my own timeline. So is it different times in different timelines too? Or just different timelines that are at different points in time? Like, not to mention it's
There are time travels involved. Just
like, look, literally
be too
paradoxes are
confused.
happening on screen right now. Good job, kid. You made a time paradox. So yeah, all in all, Paradox Pokemon is definitely a very good name for them. And we went super into depth with all of them in this award-winning mini-series of videos. So we'll just cover the basics here. Go watch those
Award-winning,
videos for
nice.
more Great
Congrats.
Tusk. Oh, yeah, the naming scheme. The names of the Paradox Pokemon are all 2 words, sort of like the scientific names of animals, or like when you break down what an animal name really means scientifically, like how hippopotamus literally just means river horse. If it were a paradox animal, it would be named River Horse. That's the idea with the past paradoxes anyway. So Great Tusk is pretty much Ancient Elephant incarnate. You take Donphan and add on some ancient monster frills and big mammoth tusks, and there you go. Looks like a giant monster truck wheel now. now, too. And it being one of the titans is fitting, too. Today, elephants are the largest land animal, but in the past, they were even bigger. In fact, the extinct straight-tusked elephant, which lived throughout what is Europe today, is debated to have been the largest land mammal to have ever even. And also, as another bonus fact, the last mammoths surviving in Europe did so in southern Iberia. Screamtail is a jigglypuff with claws, fangs, and a long tail-like puff of hair. Honestly, it's just missing like a bone in the hair, and it's your classic depiction of a Flintstones-esque cave woman. Its singing is more screaming-like, which brings to mind screamo, punk, and death metal type music. Genres known for their primal grunts and expulsions of raw, unfiltered emotion, not held back by modern society's sophistication. Ooh, wah! Which may also be what Sandy Shocks is pulling
pretty good.
from. I mean, it's just a magneton that has magnetic iron shaving stuck to it, giving it a wild, hair metal, Kiss-esque vibe, which the makeup also helps with. Many bands of the genre dress almost like barbarians, after all, uncivilized warriors from the classical ages. But the Pokemon is also like a lodestone, kinda, a naturally magnetic rock that was also the first magnetized tool humans ever used. How shandy. Picking up iron shavings from the beach to make it fluff. That pun was really rough. Brute Bonnet is an Amoonguss with fungi on its fungi and a dinosaur body? But notably, the ancient world was a lot more moist and had plants and vines and moss and fungus just growing stinking everywhere. This is before grass evolved, by the way, and did you know sharks are older than trees? Before trees as we know them today, mushrooms were the trees. The mushrooms were huge! This Pokemon has a bonnet of sorts, I suppose. An old-fashioned hat, though visually it's more like a Sandogasa, which sometimes had cloth drooping around it inside or along the edges for more protection from the sun and the elements. Though there are also mushrooms which grow droopy bits just like this, particularly the Syzygites, which are super ancient mushrooms that are still around today. And come to think of it, that droopy moss may also relate to retro paleo art, which commonly depicted sauropods with vines and moss and stuff all over and around them. Fluttermane, then, is just kind of a Misdreavus, but it's less domesticated.
Looks high, Fluttermane.
Feathery hair now and sharper teeth.
Laughing and giggling.
Wilder cave woman makeup. It's just a rough and tumble Misdreavus. But what it adds to Misdreavus' Banshee yokai origins has to do with Spain's invasion of many Native American lands, where we find Canoncystonites, otherwise known simply as flying heads. They were basically ghost heads in various states of decay, with long, feathery wings sprouting from them, and they similarly scream.
Okay.
Slitherwing is fun. On its own, it's a bit of a mix of Volcarona and Larvesta, while its wings also resemble the big back plates of a Stegosaurus, which goes along with its seemingly random dinosaur tail, which is actually a Cormata, which are seen on some butterflies and moths like the Creatonatus genghis. It also looks a bit like a dinosaurized Atlas moth when they hold their wings upright, and notably, winged insects as a whole first evolved wings in this shape, being held upwards like this, rather than folded down back on the body like more modern insects. And also, insects were much larger then too. It's also worth bringing up Batra, another ancient Godzilla kaiju related to Mothra, and maybe related to this mon, given the horns and being ancient and fiery and all. Roaring Moon is like a mega salamence that pulls from the general idea of feathered dinosaurs and feathered dragons, and may relate to the moon due to some theoretical origins. Firstly, consider that Mega Salamence is also known in the game as the Blood-Soaked Crescent, and also consider that blood moons are seen as spooky evil omens throughout basically all of history, but really they are just caused by partial eclipses. Now, looking to Chinese mythology, they believed eclipses were caused by dragons attacking the moon, and in the Philippines, which again was heavily influenced, the Minokawa and Bakunawa were a bird-like dragon and a long, scaly dragon who are said to cause eclipses too. You could almost see Roaring Moon as a combination of these. Now, Walking Wake, Raging Bolt, and Gouging Fire. I like to call them the proto-legendary beasts because they are based on the legendary beasts, but with dinosaur elements added on. Specifically, a Raptorian theropod, a long-necked sauropod like the Brontosaurus, whose name happens to mean thunder lizard,
its head in the
and
clouds.
a Ceratopsian of sorts. All of these Pokemon also add dragon type to the originals too. And if we now look to Incan mythology, we find some really fun connections. But first of all, the Incan Empire was another South American empire that Spain kinda finished off. But now look at Incan dragons known as Amaru. They were these chimeric mergers of several animals, and their individual parts could swap which animals they pull from whenever, since they were also shapeshifters. But still, very fitting that the original legendary beasts, who were already cat cat, dog, beast things now also add dinosaur parts, of all things. These dragons are said to be responsible for the rain, hail, lightning, and fire that comes from the sky. Already fitting of these beasts, but we can get even more specific, as there are a few notable named Amaru in mythology. You could even look like Koha or Iapa, a feline deity, or Chokchinche, an Amaru who prefers the form of a long, serpentine, golden yellow puma. Look at how long and zigzaggy its neck is. And guess what it likes to do? It likes to play in the clouds and cause thunderstorms. Now this here is Chiquichinche, and this Incan artifact, which depicts all of Incan cosmology, has its standing guard over a water spring on its two hind limbs, I should add, while breathing out hail and having bird elements, because it is related also to Wakon, the Nazca Incan god of the rain and the south wind, like how Suicune is the Pokemon of the north wind. And also, if you go back in time far enough, birds are the two-legged dinosaurs that once walked the earth. They just fly now and are tiny and cute. Wakon was also known as the boneless god and the lightest of all gods. Same thing with Walking Wake in this trio. And Gouging Fire then has the headwear of various Incan gods or emperors. The most notable of which is Mano Capac, the first Incan emperor who famously
got a little dog
loved
line.
jaguars and was said to have been a god of
guess a jaguar.
fire himself, born from the flames of a cave
Well,
as
that's
the
a pet.
child of the sun god. Again, that's enough of a connection already, but on that cosmology artifact, we see another Chokchinche, because Incan cosmology is very complex. We don't have time to get into it here, but what matters is that this star is the golden feline, or the morning star, said to be a tiny burning star and also a golden jaguar or puma related to Mano Capac. It really is perfect. And that's without even mentioning the Incan Trinity, who find themselves on the back of every Incan calendar. They are three animals said to represent and protect the heaven, earth, and underworld since the time of the Inca, to even some spiritualists today. They are a puma, a snake, and a condor, huh? Gouging Fire's the puma, since they really just gave Entei a hat. Raging Bolt is already a serpapard too, the mythical leopard snake hybrid from Mesopotamia, and that one named Amaru preferred the form of a feline with a snake's neck and all, so boom, it's your snake. And what were condors dozens of millions of years ago? That's right, theropod dinosaurs, Walking Wake. And some Amaru also protected Pachamama, who is a part of what inspired Terapagos, but we'll get to that. For now, onwards towards the future. Paradoxes. They're a bunch of robots. But there's more to it than that, I promise. Because each of them is a different kind of robot, kinda sorta, and each begins their name in the same way, with iron. It could just be the same naming scheme the past Paradoxes had, but made boring because they are all the same thing at their core, robots, so they're all iron. But I like the idea that maybe it's an acronym for something followed by their code name. IRON, Treads. Iron Treads is your sci-fi spherical war drone with some sci-fi monocycle elements. You'll notice that a lot of the future Paradoxes are just references to tropes in futuristic sci-fi media. But the connection to war drones is fitting since war elephants were a big thing. Iron Hands is a cyborg, a human-machine hybrid like Robocop or Cyborg. But question, was it a Hariyama turned cyborg or a human sumo wrestler turned Pokemon cyborg? It wouldn't be the first time a human got Pokemonified. But anyway, it's got these big glowing hands that would perfectly help it as a sumo wrestler, while also referencing the common mecha anime trope of mechs launching their fists at their opponents, or even the powerful glowy grips that Gundams have. Iron Moth is an alien observational satellite, hence its wings resembling space telescopes. It could even be a reference to the Black Knight satellite, since it has a similar body shape. Basically, this is a piece of space debris that triggered all sorts of alien conspiracy theories, just like Foo Fighters. UFOs said to resemble glowing balls of fire high in the sky, hence its fire typing. The poison then could be due to any number of toxic metals and toxic moth species, including the one regular Larvesta is based on. But actually, arsenic is a metal that can be bright yellow or bright orange, is highly toxic, and some species of moth will purposefully eat it to make themselves toxic to deter predators. That's hardcore.
Yeah,
it is.
Jugulus. So Jugulus basically just means neck
Oh, those
in
wings
Latin because
are-
it has 3 necks. It is a robot hydra,
Like spider legs?
Mecha
Yeah.
King Ghidorah from Godzilla. But also, as sketchy and not trustworthy as the Pokédex is for the Paradox Pokemon, it does still say that this Pokemon is the offspring of a Hydreigon that fell in love with a robot. Sex robots are the future, but also that would kind of make Iron Jugulus a Xenobot, a synthetic biological life form designed by computers and built by combining different biological tissues. As sci-fi as that sounds, they are actually real and being studied for all kinds of uses today. Maybe there is some biological tissue inside this metal exoskeleton. Then Iron Bundle is a snow machine of sorts that walks around a bit like a classic wind-up robot toy and is said to have been created by an ancient civilization. Perhaps then the classic sci-fi trope of super advanced fallen civilizations, like many depictions of Atlantis, or like the many alien species that had super high-tech technology before mysteriously vanishing, leaving their tech behind to give you, the protagonist, super cool powers that none of the other aliens have. Only I guess this Pokemon isn't that advanced. It looks like those creepy animatronic Santas. Now, Tyranitar itself was always a reference to Godzilla from the get-go, making MT and Pokestar Studios a Mecha Godzilla, but now we actually have another, more advanced and alien-y Mecha Godzilla with iron thorns. Is it like a mecha version of Space Godzilla then? Well, I like how the thorns on its back are normally retracted, only sticking out when they need to. Perhaps like when robots in anime and video games need to cool off their power cores after a big attack. They are common weak points, so they gotta be protected inside of armor most of the time, but overheating is a big issue for a high-powered mech, so they gotta rapidly cool now and again. Iron Valiant is said to be a mad scientist's invention, whose goal was to make the ultimate psychic-type Pokemon by
Pretty cool design.
combining the likes
Yeah.
of Mega Gallade and Mega Gardevoir.
Did you say, like, those are
It's a bit
some
of a
cool-
failed experiment because it instead took the secondary typing of both. It is fairy fighting type, and it's also got a bit of like a Terminator-esque military robot vibe, right? I mean, glowing Mino eyes, very still and upright posture, and only moves as needed. They really did take the emotion Pokemon and turned it into a cold killer who's dead inside. Absolutely no free will in that head, as it's got a very basic AI powering it. The laser swords are cool though. Laser swords are cool in any media they find themselves in. And speaking of swords, now, while entirely theoretical, I do like the idea of Iron Leaves being like Iron Valiant's steed. The colors match and they both move in the very same sort of basic animatronic-y kind of way, but Iron Leaves, Iron Boulder, and Iron Crown make up the trio I like to call the Iron Swords of Justice, as they are the Swords of Justice trio, but iron. But actually not iron. I should probably clarify that now. None of these robots likely have any straight-up iron in them. Iron is just a code name, or it's just a generic term for metal. Think the Iron Giant. He's a super advanced alien mecha guy. Why would a super advanced alien race make a thing out of a very rudimentary metal, you know? In reality, these future Paradox Pokemon are likely made out of mysterious alien future alloy we don't know about. It's harder than anything mankind has made. Typical future
Mantium?
alien sci-fi
Yeah.
movie tropes. But anyway, the Iron Swords of
Got a
Justice.
Mantium.
All three have
Vibranium.
laser
Vibranium.
swords and are said to
Another
be
good one.
weapons
Yep.
themselves. It is even said that they had been modified by an evil organization. Ooh, I guess that would explain why they are all almost inversions of their original forms. While the Swords of Justice all share the fighting type, the Iron Swords swap that out for psychic. But whether that's just so that they're super effective over their originals in a sort of Metal Sonic versus Sonic kind of plot, or if that's just because psychic is the smart type and they are now super intelligent AI, is unknown for now. I take it the anime is going to shed a lot of light on the true nature of all of the Paradox Pokemon, because the games sure didn't. But one more important bit of info for them. As Violet's version of Scarlet's proto-legendary beasts, how do they fit into the big picture? Well, the original beasts are from Johto, a very traditional and old-fashioned Japanese region. Just like Kitakami, which is close by and where we go in the game's DLC. But the other DLC location is Blueberry Academy, a very high-tech futuristic school off the coast of Unova, which not only is where the original Swords of Justice are found, but also had a lot of past versus future theming of its own, leaning much more heavily onto the future, since that's also what New York City came to represent on the global stage in the entire 20th century. In fact, America as a whole, which Unova sort of represents when you dig into it, advanced the whole world into the future during the 20th century, especially from a Japanese perspective. Sure, America developed the most advanced weapons in history at the time and used them on Japan. twice, but they also stuck around in Japan afterwards and reformed the country in a way that led to the Japanese economic miracle, turning Japan into the front runner for electronics manufacturing in the late 20th century. America, forcefully and with weapons, advanced Japan into the future. Again, I might add, after the whole black ship debacle we don't have time to get into.
Open the country. Stop having it be closed.
But all I'm saying here is, it makes sense for this iconic Unovan trio to become the super advanced weapons of the future. And now, there are only 2 more Paradox Pokemon, and they are also the box legendary Pokemon, Koraidon, aka Winged King, and Miraidon, aka Iron Serpent. On top of all of the motorcycle and lizard stuff we already covered with Cyclizar, the Pokemon they are the Paradox forms of, we get some cool new origins as well. Koraidon now has a large feather headdress, both to harken back to dinosaurs having feathers, and to show just how kingly or chiefly it is. While a bit unfortunate, the idea European colonizers gave to the American natives were that they were old-fashioned at best, savages at worst. These barbarians still wear a plethora of animal parts. How subhuman! I don't know why I'm making them French. We're talking about the Spanish and the English, like both. I guess they surround France. While more respected these days, the idea that Native American garb is garb of the ancient past has stuck around, especially given that it is made of materials all of our ancestors wore clothes made from at one point. Many peoples across the Americas used feather headdresses as a status symbol. Personally, I always think of those worn by the Cree, and also Montezuma, the Aztec emperor at the time of Spanish's arrival. And just look at him in Civilization 6. Wow, such a cool outfit. Plus consider that Indian is a motorcycle brand, which is a fun bonus, but there's more to it than just that. This brand is considered the one responsible for the dawn of motorcycles in America. While motorcycles were invented in France in 1895, it was Indian Motorcycle in 1901 who brought their design to America and began popularizing and producing them in mass. Massachusetts, which is right next to New York, Unova, where one of their founders lived even. But back to the Pokemon. Koraidon is much more dinosaur-like without referencing any specific one, however. It's just a bigger, bulkier, feathered lizard, which lizards are not dinosaurs, birds are, but the common belief is that dinos are just big lizards, so it's fine. Now, I really like how compared to Miraidon, you can tell that Koraidon is built for off-roading in the rugged wilderness, with the feet and the rough skin and the off-road tires as opposed to street tires. He is so cool. And then Miraidon is full-on a futuristic-looking racing motorcycle, sport bikes and super bikes, almost like the ones from Tron. It's got jet engines and can fold its legs in and actually has spinning wheels because it's a robot and they can do that. The name Iron Serpent it has in Professor Tuto's notes is interesting because serpents don't have legs typically. So is it like that snake that scientists gave limbs to? Are these robotic prosthetics? Hence them being able to fold in so much.
Scientists did that for a snake.
And being electric could just be because robots are, powered by electricity, but it could also relate to the Sugar, basically a large thunder snake from Basque mythology. And again, the Basque culture is that of northern Spain and southern France. Now, as a duo, they are interesting. A duo of serpentine dragons, huh? So backing up to the Paradox Beasts and Swords and how they are Incan, so Native American, and New York-y future past stuff, and how I mentioned that the motorcycle popularity is thanks to Indian Motorcycle right next to New York, Unova. But it's also fun to point out that the symbol of the whole Incan Empire was a rainbow between 2 Amaru, Incan dragons, in serpentine form. Notably, Scarlet and Violet are the 2 opposing ends of the light spectrum, and thus the entire rainbow of colors would be between them. And it's this dragon-originated rainbow that surrounds the Incan goddess Pachamama, a sort of Mother Nature goddess who is very fond of turtles, and who is often represented by a disc with many multicolored symbols on it. Sound familiar? Terapagos may be one of the most in-depth Pokemon to date, if my conspiracy board is to be believed. It's the Chinese dragon turtle who often had a smaller turtle on top of it. It's the Japanese Minogame. It's the Galapagos giant tortoise and the South American islands it's a symbol of. It's the turtle calendars many Native Americans used to keep track of the passage of time, as many thought turtles were celestial timekeepers. And it's the one turtle in East Indian, Chinese, Chinese and Native American belief that the world is on the back of a turtle. Hence also many natives' name for North America being Turtle Island. It's turtles all the way down, man. I literally talked about this for like 90 minutes here in this video. Go check that out for the details. But pulling from cultures all across the globe makes sense for a world turtle, right? But at its core, I'd argue it's Pachamama, protected by the Incan dragons, surrounded in a rainbow of symbols. She is the core source of spiritual power in nature. Perhaps in Pokemon's case, the source of varying types. Terapagos is, after all, the source of terastallization, which shows itself as very gem-like, right? Keep note that gems are second only to gold as far as buried treasure goes, and that they are found deep in the earth, and that as a feng shui dragon turtle, it is inherently already a bringer of wealth symbolically. Plus, gems, even of the same kind, can appear as totally different colors because of the way their structures refract light. Prism rainbow stuff, the light spectrum, scarlet to violet, and I'm kind of going all over the place, aren't I? It's hard summarizing 90 minutes of stuff. Well, okay, the 4 treasures of ruin. They have confused a mini and even a me, but when looked at in the context of the Paradox Pokemon and the box legendaries and in the context of Terapagos, they begin to make more sense. Again, feature-length deep dive video about that here. It gave us a magical conspiracy board. It points out that there might be a second Terapagos located in the Gen 10 region as well. Watch it. It's good. This quartet of Pokemon are all treasures from a far-off land, imported by an old Paldean king. And the real-world equivalent fits. Just like with Japan, Portugal did all sorts of trade between China and Europe too, bringing back treasures of all kinds. And if we look to Feng Shui, Chinese geomancy, whose sort of main symbol is clearly an inspiration to the seals we find these 4 treasures in, we can actually line up each of the 4 treasures with 4 of the 5 aspects or elements of Feng Shui. And then Terapagos, the great treasure of Area 0, lines up with the 5th. Remember, Terapagos and these 4 treasures are inherently linked, not just because they are all called treasures, but because this symbol, which is found in Area 0 above where Terapagos is, pinpoints the exact locations of where the 4 treasures of ruins are sealed away. So who's to say Area 0 isn't a sort of seal for Terapagos in the same way, but Terapagos needed a much more powerful seal, so it's the entirety of Area 0. Technically, those connections are theoretical, though, so let's talk about the individual treasures now. Wo-Shen is the ruinous treasure of wood. Its name translates from Chinese into bamboo tablet snail. As early as the 1200s BC, China was using bamboo strips and wood to write on, and the few that survived to this day are considered archaeological treasures. Visually, it is a sort of generic bush in the shape of a decollete snail, who have shells matching how the wood wraps around Wo-Shen. And plus, these snails are native to the Mediterranean region. Spain's there. And it looking like an old, wise, bearded man is no mistake. It's the king's scribe, writing down all of the daily goings-on in the king's castle, especially of the Chinese variety. Literally, Chi-Fu from Mulan. Look, when Wo-Shen emotes, it even has the mustache. Xian Pao translates literally into sword leopard, and it is literally a snow leopard made of literal snow. And I like that a lot. Snow leopards call the Himalayas home, which is fitting of its Chinese origins, but that's not the only literality. The treasure it wields is an ancient sword broken in 2 in its mouth, making it also a literally saber-toothed tiger. And apart from the typical Ice Age Diego body type you're probably thinking of when I say saber-toothed tiger, no, there are actually several saber-toothed cats with longer bodies just like Xian Pao, like the Hoplopophonius. That's not how it's pronounced, but that's how I like to say it. It, along with many other Macarodontineae and Nimravinae, roamed North America and Eurasia in the olden days, by which I mean, like, Ice Age stuff. Ting Lu, literally deer cauldron, is a deer made of dirt with a big metal bowl on its head. The
strong ass neck.
Filled with fluid, and like a powerful metal pick or shovel, it strikes the ground and creates cracks and fissures. Deer and elk of all kinds, of course, live all around the world, but the Irish elk is notable, not only because it lived in the ancient world's northern Asia through to Ireland, but also because it had the heaviest antlers of all. Ting Lu's Dex entry mentions its head is exceedingly heavy, after all, and plus it just looks like it's struggling to hold it up. Poor thing just has a head so low, it's like many of the Viraco statues in Iberia. Then Chi Yu is my favorite. Its treasures are the jade beads around its eyes that make it resemble black moor and telescope goldfish, or even like lion chew and orandas. But considering Chi Yu's very flowy
It's
fins,
brain.
the fish it most
Its head.
closely resembles
Yeah.
is the butterfly
exposed brain.
telescope goldfish. Look at these beauties. But no matter the specifics, these are all goldfish
happy little
with puffy
fish.
bits around their eyes.
He just made
Goldfish, of
bubblegles.
course, are a kind of carp, hence Chi Yu literally translating to jade carp. And like many jade ornaments, goldfish are of course a traditional Chinese ornamental fish, often
But with-
treasures themselves. In fact, the practice of keeping goldfish in bowls was brought to Europe from China, likely by Portugal. But enough with the fish, let's talk jade beads. They are magatama, ancient treasures from Japan's Yomon period. While the common ones were made of stone and clay, more precious ones were made of jade and other precious stones. They typically adorned necklaces and were said to invoke spiritual power or life energy or chi. Chi Yu. In fact, the shape itself is theorized to have been inspired by fetuses, souls, or the moon, all of which are connected in ancient Japanese mythology. In media today, magatama are used in all sorts of Japanese video games and anime as shorthand for powerful spiritual artifact, which perhaps then is part of what drew the power of envy alone to these green treasures. Now, all four of these treasures, the artifacts themselves, gained life through the power of grudges, hatred, fear, and
That Pokemon's
envy,
doing.
and caused
Yeah.
great ruin to the people of Paldea. Hence, them being sealed away behind a powerful symbol that resembles the feng shui symbol of longevity. Shou. Paldea was, after all, protecting their longevity by sealing them away. And looking at all of the things feng shui represents and tries to balance with its symbols, peace, prosperity, fortune, longevity, that's kind of the opposite of what the treasures of ruin represent and what they do, making the symbol a perfect seal. But I can't move past them without also mentioning the four perils of Chinese mythology and how they could relate to these four treasures of ruin as well. The four perils, interestingly, are the antagonists to the four benevolent or celestial animals, which are already in Pokemon as the Therian forms of the Landorus Quartet, who interestingly were also quite involved in that big Terapagos video. But who are these perils? I'm going to mispronounce them, but the first is Tao Ti, a beast of gluttony whose face often adorns metal cauldrons and bronze vessels, linking it right up with Ting Lu. Hundun is a faceless thing with many limbs and four wings, which represents chaos. Perhaps those four wings are like the four butterfly wings of the butterfly telescope goldfish that is Chi Yu, whose flames are chaotic by nature. Shen Pao being Chong-Chi is the most obvious, as it is depicted as a tiger-like
Yeah.
beast that violently shreds and eats people with its
That
very sharp
tracks.
teeth. And that makes Wo Shen Tao Wu, who doesn't actually look like Wo Shen at all,
Nope.
as it's described as part tiger, part boar, and having a human face. But it is noted that it is specifically a scribe who writes down the evil deeds of powerful people. Literally what Wo Shen does. Now then, I've been talking for so long. We're finally at the final group of Pokemon in Generation 9, unless, oh gosh, is Legends ZA gonna be like adding a bunch more? Is that gonna be a Gen 9 game, or is it gonna technically be Gen 10? Well, for now, this is the final group of Gen 9 Pokemon. Pecharunt, its Loyal 3, and Ogerpon, all related. As a group, their relation is clear. The Japanese folktale of Momotaro is essentially to Japan what fairy tales like the Three Little Pigs, Rapunzel, and Cinderella are to the West. Widely known and iconic throughout their culture. To super simplify and shorten the story, it is about a little boy who is born from a magic peach, and later he goes to a journey to Onigashima in order to defeat the evil Oni, aka ogres. But on the way, he befriends a dog, a monkey,
Of course he
and a
does.
pheasant who join him on his quest for good and justice against the evil ogres. So already, there's the origin of all five. But Pokemon flipped the script. In the story of the Teal Mask DLC, it is revealed that the people who were honoring the Loyal 3 were tricked. The ogre is the kind and good one, and Pecharunt, our Momotaro, is the one doing the evil deeds,
Oh.
including not merely asking the Loyal 3 to help, but actually enslaving them with mind control through its toxic chain
mind bullets.
and binding
Oh,
emoji.
wow.
We later see that Pecharunt can even mildly enslave people this way, turning them into chicken dancing zombies. So silly. The story beats even play out exactly like a
Pecharunt's
child-friendly
jerk.
zombie horror B-movie. Kabuki. I love it. I also love the detail that rather than a peach
Evil.
directly, Pecharunt takes the form of a Pecha Berry, the Pokemon world's equivalent to a peach. On top of that, it even has Momotoro's headband and hairstyle, though heavily stylized and turning the front bits into
I can't help
large
but just
eyebrows,
like
too.
seeing
As
a
for the
pig's
loyal
face
three,
every time
their
they show
names
that,
are
because
all
like it looks
plays
like he's
on
got a little snout
old-fashioned
here.
words for feeling good.
And like
Everything is hunky
the
dory.
hairstyle kind of looks like
Okie dokie.
ears.
I'm feeling that sweet serendipity, but in reality, they are all Minos. Not inherently, mind you. Note that none of them are dark type. They just do mean dark things because of Pecharunt's control. That control being why they all have those chains as a part of their designs. That's likely also why they are all part poison type. Why else would like a dog be poison type? These toxic chains have been attached to them for so long that they have become a part
Sad.
of them. And I really like how they are a part of them. Like, look at Pheasantipity. It uses the chains like an obi, the cloth belts around the waist of kimono, which its feathery plumage resembles overall, particularly those of geisha ladies, female performance artists known for beauty and talent above all else. They always had the white faces like Pheasantipity too, and Pheasantipity's feet are even pointed in a kind of a really weird-looking way to resemble the shoes they would wear to make them appear taller. But here's a fun fact. Pheasantipity is a male-only Pokemon, which actually makes them an Onagata. You see, for a time, women were not allowed to perform in kabuki theater plays, so instead, the more feminine men would take on their roles whenever necessary. And while women are allowed in kabuki these days, the tradition of Onagata lives on. Plus, that is also fitting of just pheasants in general. Look at a male pheasant compared to a female pheasant. The males are much more beautiful and glamorous. Monkey Dory is like a little monkey, likely the Japanese macaque, given that it's the only monkey native to Japan. Though it doesn't have a tail, so is it instead just like a weirdo chimp? Little weirdo. It uses the toxic chain as a headband, perhaps specifically a hachimaki, which are said to strengthen the spirit and help its wearers persevere through difficult tasks. Some even say they protect you from evil spirits, which is pretty ironic given the Pokemon context right now. And given Monkey Dory's mischievous nature and psychic typing, it could be based on Satori, a monkey yokai who plays tricks and can read people's minds. Other than that, Monkey Dory's hair resembles the Japanese chonmage hairstyle. Also, it only having 2 toes is reminiscent of traditional Japanese footwear. Then Okidogi is a big Japanese Akita or Shiba Inu, and it wears its chain like a dog collar and leash. Other than that though, it's basically just like the Buff Doge meme, but Incineroarified, because nothing else about it is really clear. So I'm not an expert on this by any means, but given the fluffy shoulders and overall shape of the black parts of the fur, it gives me sort of Mongol warrior and barbarian vibes, which is fitting of its fighting type, though I can't say for sure that's what they were going for. But in that case, its tail is definitely like a big Oni club, which is really
I totally
extra
see it.
thick kanabo, which were also used by Mongols. Plus, Oni are typically depicted with furry skirts, kinda like it, but I could also see those bits as Kusazuri or Hayadate, the lower parts of samurai armor. Perhaps it's a Japanese rogue using stolen or damaged parts of armor off of dead samurai, a somewhat common thing during times of war. Or perhaps this is just like those fluffy-ended jackets that are used to make bigger, tough Japanese men look even more imposing in media. Or perhaps it's all just generic on purpose. Looks good though. Looks like a rough and tumble delinquent jacket with torn sleeves. And actual sleeves too. Kinda like how Jotaro Joestar's hat is also its hair with the fluff. And you know, he's a delinquent. Is this a trope? No time for that, because lastly, Ogerpon, the big, mean, evil Oni, aka Ogre, that Momotaro and friends fought, only the opposite. This
It's
is
nice.
a friendly little ogre, hence the name ending with Pon, a Japanese honorific that's sort of cutesy baby speak for someone who's super adorable and
He's really cute when he
but it
runs.
is definitely the cutest little Oni I have ever seen. Even its classic Oni club is cute and sparkly, and I love its wooden Japanese shoes. Ogerpon changes its type and cloak colors based on which mask it's holding, and those masks have a lot of history behind them too. But to greatly shorten and simplify the details, they are all various Japanese No theater masks. Like Kabuki
walking.
theater, No theater had main characters with exaggerated facial features for the audience to see from afar. But No took it to an even greater extreme through the use of masks, and many of these masks became Japanese icons and are sold as novelties at summer festivals, which again is what's happening during these events. Kitakami, middle of their summer festival. That's why there's also all these other masks being sold too. And like how we in the West have the classic comedy and tragedy masks, in Japan they have their own set, which includes Okinamen, Onamen, Onimen, and Butsumen. Joy, sorrow, anger, and fulfillment masks. And they are in line with the teal, wellspring, hearthflame, and cornerstone masks, respectively. They've got the same facial expressions, just to be more monster Pokemon-y and reflective of their types. As for what plant Ogerpon is, because it is grass type always, remember, this is actually really cool. So seeing as the legs are clearly wood and can be put together to make like a trunk, that makes Ogerpon out to be a small tree. Likely a yuzu tree. Japanese oranges. Notice Ogerpon's orange face and yellow spots, and the flower even resembles citrus flowers. Plus, only yuzu is a related variety of the fruit. But then you watch it attack and it uses vines and brambles in a way unlike any other
Angar.
grass type's vine whip esque attacks. See, it's not at all like their weird green rubber hose appendage. It's got leaves and a jaggedy branch bits, and it's still long though, and plus its signature move is named Ivy Cudgel. Citrus trees don't have vines or ivy or these weird brambly bits, but you know what does? You know what these vines and branches look like? Grapevines. What school do you go to in Scarlet and Violet? Well, it depends. You either go to Naranja or Uba Academy, depending on which game. And those words are Spanish for the fruits, orange, and grape. And I love this generation's Pokemon designs. Overall, there are definitely some misses, but overall, And I hope you learned some really cool facts about them, their origins, and some real-world facts and history too. That's what we love to do here on this channel, teach about things through Pokemon.
I thought I knew it probably at one point that the floor was that the Jester hat was to mock the floor. But like it was that I appreciate that one when he's talking about like real life things, and also yeah. So like I think my favorite of the Pokemons we saw was Annihilate. I thought that like redesign was really cool and like making it more like ghost type and just menacing and dark. And now to like counter that though, I really liked the 3 little fairy type ones that had like the little different mallets, like
oh yeah, like what was it? Something Tink and then
Tink, Tough, and Ton. But like I can't remember what it was. Like it was like Tink-a-Tink and Tink-a-Ton, or Tink-a-Tough and Tink-a-Ton.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was it.
Yeah. I like those just because it kind of got bigger, the Pokemon itself, but like the mallets is what really grew, and I just that's something like a little bit different. So I think that's why it stuck out to me.
There were so many of these Pokemon that I like. My first big takeaway was like, wow, Pokemon are so diverse. Like it kind of feels like there's nothing off the table.
Yeah.
In terms of what could be a Pokemon. I loved the first half of this just because they had so many of basically like the little Pokemon, and they were so cute. And I thought the names were fantastic for these as well. And then I appreciated in like this sort of like second half of the video how much I learned about turtles. And like the influence of turtles. I had no idea about the belief of them being like the timekeepers at one point.
Yeah, I know that either.
So that was a new piece of information. I had been somewhat familiar with the idea of like, we're all on the back of a giant turtle. Like that, I was like, okay, seen that before. And we saw that was it Avatar? At one point there on the turtle's back, there's like an island or something.
Yeah, it was Avatar.
So like the idea of a turtle's back being sort of like a body of land, or essentially like what the planet's balanced on, I've heard, but I had not heard about them being essentially the timekeepers of the planet, and I thought that was really cool. I liked
Fido. That was another one. The 2 dogs that were like bred.
Yes.
I can't remember what the other one's name was, but like it had like the Princess Leia like Cinnabons like.
Yeah, it was something Bun, I think.
Yeah. But I like Fido better between the 2 of them, and I like the like dark vampire Jigglypuff one as well. The like Paradox ones, when we showing them off, are pretty cool. Towards the second half, to me, like it just felt like sometimes there were too many tangents that like Loxton went on, and it was like, and then like before I got to the next one, so it kind of like lost me sometimes in those tangents. Like if it was going down like something that I didn't necessarily like it didn't click with me like as interesting as other things. Whereas like I feel like in the first half of the video, or the first like 2/3 of the video, it was a little bit like tighter as far as like, okay, like here's some like maybe 3 quick facts or something like that, and like if he went on a tangent, it didn't seem to like go on as long. But I mean, like that's what I appreciate about Loxton and Noggin. Like he goes on these tangents, and a lot of times like it's just teaching you, as he said, like some real world lore, and then also the Pokemon lore as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I felt like the first half was tighter, but I also really enjoyed kind of how much history got pulled in on this one, different pieces. Obviously, a lot of this tied into, if not everything, tied into Spain. And that I thought was super interesting because Spain, yeah, I took Spanish class in high school, but like it's not like I know even scratching the surface of like the rich culture that is Spain. And so learning more about it through this was quite fun. And since you brought up the dogs, I really appreciated the dog. I want to call it a hellhound just because it was morbid, but like the one with the candle on its head that then in the second iteration had like the tombstone on its head and like the hump for the freshly buried body on its back.
That was creative design.
I thought that was a really interesting design, and then also the lore that it was based on. I had never heard of that before, so that was really cool.
So let us know your favorites down below in the comments. We're going to go on to Pokemon Origins after this, and then we haven't decided exactly what we're going to do after Pokemon Origins, but I think there's only 4 episodes, so we'll figure it out and let you all know, and you can check out more Pokemon here 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Sundays, and you can get early access by joining our YouTube membership at the little join button down below.
Yep.
Thanks so much for watching our reaction for Pokemon Generation 9, but just keep in mind
that our reaction is definitely not definitive.